The alarm on Marcus Hayes' phone buzzed at 5:47 a.m., just like it had for the past 12 years. He didn't need the sound anymore. His body woke at that time out of sheer habit, out of necessity, out of the kind of discipline that children don't understand until they're old enough to realize their father never slept past that hour. The apartment was small. The walls were thin enough that he could hear the couple upstairs arguing in whispers. The sound traveled through the building like a secret nobody asked to know. Marcus rose slowly. His knees cracked slightly as his feet hit the cold floor. At 38, he moved like a man older than his years. The mechanic's work did that to you. 12 years of crawling under cars. 12 years of lying on his back staring at transmission fluid that looked like blood. 12 years of hands that learned the language of engines better than they learned the language of people. His daughter Lily was still asleep in the next room. He could hear her breathing through the thin wall. He could picture her the way she always slept, one arm hanging off the bed like she was reaching for something just beyond the mattress. She was 7 years old. She'd been sleeping that way since her mother died. Angela had pointed it out once years ago when Lily was still in the crib. "She's reaching for something," Angela had said. And Marcus understood even then. His daughter was reaching for things she'd never had the chance to hold. Angela had been gone for 2 years, 3 months and 11 days. Marcus had counted. He had counted every single day. The shower was cold. The hot water heater in this building worked when it felt like working, which was roughly 3 days a week. He stood under the spray anyway, letting the cold water run over his shoulders, feeling something like awakening. Water ran off his dark skin, carrying away the dreams he didn't remember having. He thought about Angela while he showered, like he did every morning. Angela always had advice on the mornings that mattered, but he was alone now, and had been for long enough that alone felt like his natural state. He dressed in the clothes he wore every day. Work pants that had been through enough washing machines to fade to a grey-brown. A t-shirt that used to be dark blue but had faded to something between memory and reality. Over that, the red rag he always kept in his back pocket. The rag was so familiar it felt like an extension of his body. By 6:15, Lily stumbled into the kitchen. Her small frame wrapped in a pink puffer jacket. 2 braids crooked on top of her head. Her backpack half zipped. "Baby girl, you're supposed to be getting dressed, not down here," Marcus said gently. She looked up at him with eyes that held too much understanding for a 7-year-old. "I couldn't sleep, Daddy. Mommy was calling me again." Every time she said this, something broke open in Marcus' chest, and then carefully stitched itself back together. He crouched down, his knees cracking again like he was 48 instead of 38, and pulled her against his chest. She was so small, she weighed almost nothing, like holding a thought instead of a child. He didn't say anything for a long moment. There was nothing he could say that he hadn't already said 100 times before. Instead, he listened to her breathing, to the sound of the world outside their building, to the absence of her mother. "Listen to me," he whispered into her hair. "Mommy's not lost. Mommy's right here." He pressed his palm flat against Lily's small chest, over her heart. "She's right in there. She's never lost. Promise." Lily's voice was so small it nearly disappeared. "I promise," Marcus said. "I promise, baby." He stood up and fixed her braids, working carefully with fingers that were better at fixing cars than fixing hair. Then he pulled a granola bar from his jacket pocket. He always kept one there. For moments like this, he handed it to her. "When the bus comes, you sit up front behind Miss Loretta. Not in the back," he said, running through the ritual they did every morning. "You understand me. I know, Daddy." She said it the way kids did when they'd heard something so many times it had become part of their bones. "What do you do if somebody says something mean to you?" "I walk away and I tell the teacher." "That's right, and what do you remember?" She rolled her eyes, because she had heard this 1,000 times. but she said it anyway. "I'm a Hayes. Hayes don't stay down." "That's right, baby, you don't stay down." He walked her to the bus stop on the corner of 134th and Amsterdam, holding her hand the whole way. His hand was large and rough, scarred from old burns and new cuts. Her hand was small and soft, completely trusting. When the yellow school bus rattled around the corner, he lifted her up onto the first step and watched her move toward a seat. She pressed her face to the window and waved. He waved back until the bus was 2 blocks away. Then he walked back to the garage with his hands jammed in his pockets, trying not to think about how cold her little fingers had been. The garage smelled like burnt coffee and motor oil, the same smell it had smelled for every morning of the past 12 years. It was the smell of Marcus' life, compressed into a building that was slowly falling apart, even as he kept it working. Frank was already under the lift when Marcus arrived, swearing at something mechanical and broken. Frank was a fat Italian man in his 60s, with a voice like gravel in a blender, the kind of voice that had been harmed by too many cigarettes and too much yelling in garages. He slid out on the creeper when he heard Marcus come in. "You're late," Frank grunted, wiping grease from his forehead with his wrist. "I'm right on time for you. Late for everybody else," Marcus said. It was the same exchange they had most mornings. It was a ritual, like everything else. Frank paused, and Marcus could see something different in his face. Something had changed. Something was wrong. "Hey, Frank started, then stopped. "Did you hear about the buyer?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What buyer?" "Mr. Roberts sold the shop. Last week, apparently." The words landed in Marcus' chest like a stone dropped into still water. He felt his stomach drop, physically drop, like an elevator cutting its cables. 12 years. He had been working for Robert Daniels for 12 years. Robert had hired him after Marcus got out, had looked at his prison record. Possession. Stupid choices made when Marcus was young and angry and broken, and had said something Marcus would never forget. "Son, I don't care what a piece of paper says. I care what your hands can do." 12 years of showing up before sunrise. 12 years of staying past sunset. 12 years of being invisible to the customers, but seen by one man who decided that Marcus' hands mattered more than his past, and Robert had sold, without telling him. "When did this happen?" Marcus asked, though he didn't really want to know the answer. "Last week, apparently. He's been sitting on it, didn't want to tell us." "Who bought it?" Frank shrugged, a helpless gesture. "Some corporate outfit, Lux Holdings or something. They own everything in the city now. Parking garages, laundromats, dialysis centers. Now they own us." Marcus felt the rag in his back pocket, like it weighed 50 pounds. He walked over to the coffee pot and poured himself a cup that he didn't want. The black surface of the coffee trembled slightly, because his hands were shaking. "What does that mean for us?" he asked, though he already knew. "Means we got a meeting at 9. Means they're going to tell us who stays and who goes." Marcus couldn't lose this job. The words were there in his throat, but he pushed them down and took a sip of coffee that tasted like ash. Frank couldn't help him. Frank was in the same boat. A man in his 60s looking at the end of his working life, with no safety net below. There was nothing Frank could do, except acknowledge that Marcus had something to lose, and that losing it would destroy him. Marcus stood there, holding the coffee he didn't want, thinking about the landscape of his life. He had a rent check due in 9 days. He had a heating bill that was already overdue. He had a daughter whose shoes didn't fit anymore, and whose winter coat was going to be too small by January. He had 12 years of showing up, of being reliable, of proving that a man with a past could still be trusted with the present. And now he had nothing. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just stood there, watching his hands shake. understanding that the only security he had ever built was about to be taken away by a corporation that saw him as a line item on a spreadsheet. At 9 a.m. sharp, a black SUV pulled up to the curb outside the garage. The kind of car that cost more than Marcus made in 2 years. A young man in a suit that Marcus could tell was expensive just by looking at it got out, and held the door open like he was trained to recognize importance. Then she stepped out. She was maybe 32. Maybe younger if you didn't look at her eyes. Long blonde hair pulled into a tight knot at the base of her skull. Red-bottomed heels that clicked on the oil-stained concrete like gunshots. A white coat that she clearly had no intention of letting touch anything in the building. She walked in and looked around, like she'd just stepped into someone's grave. "Good Lord," she said, and her voice was the kind of voice that had been trained in private schools and expensive universities. "It smells like a landfill in here." The man behind her laughed too loud. "We'll have it renovated by Q2, Ms. Sterling." Victoria Sterling. Marcus registered the name. He had read it in the papers. He had seen her face on the cover of Forbes magazine. At the bodega. Youngest female CEO of a Fortune 500 investment firm. Net worth $800 million. Featured in Vanity Fair, dated a senator once. She was standing 15 feet away from him, and she had not looked at him once. "Gather the employees," she said. It wasn't a request, it was a command. They lined up. 7 mechanics, 2 desk clerks. Robert looking like he wanted to disappear. Vivian Victoria walked down the line like a general inspecting troops in a war she was sure she'd already won. Her heels clicked with every step. Click, 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 like a countdown to something terrible. "You'll make this short," she said. "You are no longer employees of Roberts Auto. You are now contractors of Sterling Holdings. Your wages will be restructured. Your health insurance will be reviewed. Your hours will be adjusted to match market efficiency metrics." She paused, letting the words settle like poison. "Which means most of you will be working longer for less." Nobody said anything. The office was silent except for the ambient sounds of the city outside. Traffic, horns, the relentless hum of a city that didn't care about any of them. "Any questions?" she asked. Frank raised his hand. "When do we get the new contracts?" "When we feel like giving them to you," she said. She turned to walk out. Then she stopped. Her eyes landed on Marcus, and for the first time since she walked in, she really looked at him, really saw him. "You," she said, "come here." Marcus didn't move for a moment. Then he stepped forward. His boots squeaked on the concrete. She looked him up and down. The way a person looks at a dog that has wandered into their dining room, like she was trying to figure out whether to call someone to remove it. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus Hayes, Mom." She said his name like it was a food she didn't like. "Marcus, that's an unusual name." "It was my grandfather's." She looked at Nathan, her assistant. "Put him on the list." "What list?" Marcus asked. The question came out before he could stop it. She didn't answer him. She spoke past him, like he wasn't there. "Nathan, he comes Friday night. I want him on the list." "Yes, Ms. Sterling." She finally looked at Marcus' face. "Friday night, Mr. Hayes. I'm hosting a networking gala at the Pierre. It is a biannual event for the CEOs and major investors of every Sterling subsidiary. I want a representative from every company I just acquired as a show of solidarity." She smiled, and the smile had no warmth in it at all. "You will be representing this shop. You will wear a suit. You will smile. You will not speak to anyone unless spoken to. Do you understand?" Marcus' jaw tightened. He felt 12 years of swallowed pride rising up his throat. He felt the rent check. He felt the heating bill. He felt Lily's cold fingers at the bus stop. He swallowed it all down. "Yes, Mum," he said. "Good." She turned to leave. Then she looked back. "Oh, and Mr. Hayes tried to shower." The room went dead silent. Nathan looked at his shoes. Frank's face turned red. The other mechanics stared straight ahead, like they hadn't heard, but they had heard. Everyone had heard. Victoria left, her heels clicking away, and the smell of her expensive perfume lingered in the garage, like evidence of something that had happened to them. The day before the gala, Marcus called Mrs. Ruiz, an older woman from church who occasionally watched Lily. Mrs. Ruiz had been taking care of people her whole life. She had raised 4 children of her own, and now she helped raise other people's kids when life fell apart. "Mrs. Ruiz, I need a favor," Marcus said over the phone. "Of course, baby. What do you need?" "I have to go somewhere tomorrow night. A work thing. I need someone to watch Lily." There was a pause. Mrs. Ruiz was smart. She could hear the weight in his voice. "Is everything okay?" "I don't know yet," Marcus said honestly, "but he'll pay you extra, I promise." Mrs. Ruiz agreed, even though they both knew Marcus didn't have extra money to pay. This was what community meant. People showing up for each other, even when it cost them something. That evening, Marcus sat on Lily's bed as she drifted towards sleep. She was curled under her blanket, her small face looking younger in the soft light of her nightlight. "Daddy, are you in trouble?" she asked suddenly. Marcus hadn't said anything about being in trouble, but children knew. They always knew. "No, baby. Daddy just has to go to an important work thing tomorrow night. He'll be back before you sleep." "Will you be okay?" "He'll be okay," he said, and the light tasted like medicine. He sat there until her breathing evened out, until she was fully asleep. Then he went to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. The suit he had bought at the thrift store for $80 was waiting on the back of the door. He took it off the hanger and held it up. The sleeves were too long. The shoulders were too wide. It was like the suit was designed for a larger version of himself. A version of Marcus that was bigger, more important, more real. He put it on anyway. The jacket hung on him. The shirt underneath was white and stiff. Brand new because his only work shirt was grease-stained beyond salvation. The tie was navy, and had learned how to tie it from a YouTube video at the library. In the mirror, he looked like a man dressed up as someone else, like a kid in his father's clothes. Lily appeared in the bathroom doorway, still in her pajamas, sleep-rumpled and half awake. "Daddy, you look different," she said. "Good different or bad different? Like you're going to work but fancy." "That's exactly right, baby. It's work, just in a different building." She climbed up onto the bathroom counter, her small feet dangling over the edge. "Will you tell her she's mean?" "Who?" "The lady. The one who was mean at the office." Marcus looked at his daughter in the mirror, at her serious little face, at the wisdom that had been forced into her too young. "No, baby," he said quietly. "Why not?" "Because she's scared." Lily tilted her head, considering this. "Scared of what?" Marcus turned to face her. "But scared of men like me. Men who have less and still stay standing." "But you're not scary, Daddy," Lily said. "I know, baby, but she doesn't know that yet." He turned back to the mirror and adjusted his tie. It was still wrong. Everything about this was wrong. But he would go anyway. He would stand tall anyway. Because Lily was watching. Because Lily was learning who her father was, not just what he did, but who he chose to be when nobody was making him choose anything. He looked at his daughter and said, "Lily, I'm going to bring home something important tomorrow night." "What?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to try." She reached her small arms around his neck and hugged him fiercely. "I'm proud of you, Daddy," she said. "I haven't done anything yet." "You're going anyway. That's brave." Friday night came like an execution date. Marcus arrived at the pier at 8 o'clock, climbing out of the cab he couldn't afford. The hotel was the kind of place where the doormen wore gloves and nodded at guests like they were acknowledging royalty. Inside the ballroom was a study in wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like captured stars. The carpet was so plush it felt like walking on clouds made of money. There were maybe 500 people there, all of them radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about rent, or heating bills, or whether their daughter's coat would fit next winter. Marcus stood by the bar, holding a drink he didn't ask for, watching his reflection in the dark surface of the glass. His broken watch, the crystal cracked from years ago, the face running 3 minutes slow, caught the light. He looked down at it, 8:03 on his watch, probably 8:06 in the real world. Time had always been relative for people like him. A man in an expensive suit noticed him and walked over. "Why are you here?" The question wasn't hostile. It was just practical, like he was genuinely curious what Marcus was doing in his space. "I was asked to come," Marcus said. "Right, of course." The man drifted away, satisfied with that answer. Another woman touched his jacket sleeve. "Is this rental?" "No, ma'am." Oh, she left, slightly disappointed that he hadn't lied. Someone else. "Does Dennis send its best?" Marcus didn't bother answering that one. The humiliation came in waves, small cuts that added up to something larger. But the strange thing was that he didn't feel small. He felt like a man watching small people perform smallness, and something in that observation gave him a kind of power. Then a woman in a red dress approached him. She was elegant, maybe 60, with eyes that had seen enough of the world to recognize something interesting when it stood in front of her. "You look like you're about to commit a crime," she said. Marcus smiled despite himself. "Just trying to survive the evening?" "And who do you answer to?" "A woman named Victoria Sterling." The woman's face changed slightly. It was subtle, but it changed. The corners of her eyes tightened. She looked away for a moment, then back. "And what does she want with you?" "I haven't figured that out yet." The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "Well, you might want to figure it out fast." And she walked away. But she looked back once. Just once. Just long enough for Marcus to know that she'd seen something. Across the ballroom, Victoria stood with Nathan at her elbow, supposedly reviewing acquisition notes, but her eyes kept finding him. The man in the ill-fitting suit. The one who didn't flinch when Harrington asked if mechanics wore Armani. The one who took each insult and let it slide off like rain. "Ms. Sterling," Nathan was speaking, but she wasn't hearing him. "Yes, the senator is waiting to—" "Why did I invite the mechanic?" she asked suddenly. Nathan looked confused. "You said every company you acquired needed representation." "No, why him specifically?" Nathan had no answer, because Victoria herself wasn't sure. She watched Marcus take another drink, not celebrating, not hiding, just standing there, intact, like the weight of the room couldn't touch him. Something about that irritated her, or something else. She wasn't sure which. A CEO named Harrington 3 drinks deep made another crack about mechanics. "You know what they should call this event? Slumming with the help." The room laughed. It was the kind of laugh that was designed to make Marcus feel smaller. But Marcus didn't drink, didn't flinch. He looked directly at Harrington, and in that look was something that made Harrington's laugh die first. It was pity. The man had just humiliated him, and Marcus Williams looked at him with pure pity. Like he was looking at something broken that couldn't be fixed. Harrington turned away. Across the room, Victoria saw this. She put her drink down slowly, and for the first time since the evening began. She wasn't sure who was powerful anymore. Later in the evening, Victoria found herself standing near Marcus. It wasn't accidental. She had navigated the crowd specifically to be near him. "Mr. Hayes," she said. Her voice was different now, less commanding, more conversational. "Tell me something. How do you see the world?" Marcus turned to face her. "I see it as a place where people need each other more than they need money." "That's naive." "Maybe, but I've watched money destroy people. I've watched grief destroy them faster, so I'm not sure which one matters more." She studied his face, like she was trying to read something written in a language she didn't speak. "You have a daughter, don't you?" "I do." "Do you ever think about giving her more than you have?" "Every day," Marcus said. "But not more money. More of me. More time. More proof that her mother's love mattered, that she's not forgotten." Victoria went very still. Something in his words had hit something in her. Then someone approached, the woman in red from earlier. She asked him a question about investments. What would he invest in if he had money? It was meant to be a softball question, something to make him uncomfortable. Instead, Marcus answered it thoughtfully. "People," he said. "I'd invest in people with nothing left to lose, because they know what it costs to be human. They'll never forget who remembered them." The woman in red smiled slightly, like she'd just confirmed something she'd suspected. Victoria heard that exchange. She filed it away. She watched the way Marcus moved through the room, like a man who had learned to take up less space than he actually occupied, like he had been trained by years of invisibility, to be almost invisible. And she wanted to break that. She wanted to push him until he broke. So later, when they were alone, or as alone as two people could be in a ballroom full of 500, she approached him again. "You seem to have thoughts about investments," she said. Her voice had an edge now. "Let me ask you this. What could a mechanic possibly teach a Fortune 500 CEO about investments?" Harrington drifted over, sensing confrontation. Other people gathered, wanting to watch. It was the kind of moment where someone was about to be humiliated, and everyone wanted to see it. Marcus looked directly at her. And in that moment, something shifted in the air between them. "I'm not sure I have anything to teach you," he said slowly, "but maybe you have something to learn." The ballroom fell silent. 500 people, one woman, one mechanic, and the sudden understanding that something important was about to happen. Marcus took a breath. He stood straighter. His posture changed. Something inside him aligned. "You asked me about investments, Ms. Sterling," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Let me teach you something." Victoria watched him, and for the first time she was no longer certain. The power she'd carried into this room, the power of her wealth, her status, her position, suddenly felt like a prop that could be taken away. "The best investment," Marcus continued, "isn't in money or property or acquisitions. The best investment is in people with nothing left to lose, because they've already paid the price of failure. They understand what it costs to be human in a way that people like you never will." He paused. He let that land. "My wife invested in me when everyone else ran, when I had a record and no future and nothing but my hands and a will to be different. She saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. That's investment. That's real." Victoria felt her throat tighten. "A man named Robert invested in me when I got out of prison, when nobody else would, when the whole world told me I was done. He looked at my hands and said, 'I care what you can do.' That's investment." Marcus looked directly at Victoria. "And you, Ms. Sterling, you have $800 million. You have power and status and the ability to change lives, but you can't invest 5 minutes in asking why someone came to this gala tonight. You mistake power for strength. You mistake cruelty for leadership." The room was absolutely still. "Real investment," Marcus said, "is in people you don't have to invest in. People you're not supposed to see. That's where transformation happens. That's where empires are actually built not by crushing people but by choosing them. He stepped closer to her. Not threateningly, just closer. "So let me ask you the question that matters, Ms. Sterling. What are you investing in? Not your money, your life, your choices, your becoming. What are you building?" Victoria looked at him, and something broke open inside her chest. She could feel 500 pairs of eyes on both of them. She could feel Nathan behind her, shocked and silent. She could feel the weight of everything she had ever been taught about power and strength and dominance, suddenly not making sense anymore. She didn't answer. Marcus stepped back and took a drink of water. His hand was steady. His breathing was steady. He had just looked into the eyes of the most powerful woman in the room, and she had blinked first. The woman in red was nodding slightly, like she'd known all along that this was coming. Harrington had turned away, suddenly very interested in a painting on the wall. Victoria stood there, breathing, understanding that something inside her had shifted. She'd come to this gala to prove her dominance. Instead, she had found herself being asked to become something more. After the gala, Marcus went to Mrs. Rui's house to pick up Lily. His daughter was asleep on the couch, her small body curled into a comma shape, completely trusting that her father would come back. He carried her to the car, Frank's truck, which Frank had insisted he borrow for the night, and buckled her in carefully. She didn't wake. Driving home on Lenox Avenue, stopped at a red light. Marcus felt the weight of everything settle into his shoulders. The speech had been cathartic, but it wasn't the whole truth. The real truth, the deeper truth, was still in a shoebox in his closet. He thought about Angela while he drove, about her voice, which he could still hear sometimes, usually when he was making big decisions. Angela would have known what to do. Angela always knew what to do. The light turned green. Tucking the blanket around her carefully, he stood there for a long moment, watching her sleep, understanding that everything he did from this point forward was going to be for her, or against her. There would be no middle ground. He went to his bedroom and opened the closet. Behind the winter coats they rarely wore, behind the extra blankets, there was a shoebox, an old Nike box. That had held nothing but possibility once. Now it held the truth. 9 years ago, when Sterling Holdings began acquiring properties around Harlem, Marcus had started noticing things. Trucks coming to the garage at odd hours. Conversations between corporate people and contractors that weren't really conversations, but exchanges of money. Invoices that didn't match up, reports that were filed and then disappeared. Had kept evidence, quietly, without telling anyone. Not because he wanted to be a hero, but because Angela had been in the hospital then, dying. And she had held his hand and said, "Keep it. The truth doesn't expire. Keep it for when it matters." Inside the box, environmental reports about contamination in neighborhoods Sterling Holdings had bought. Safety code violations in dialysis centers that Sterling subsidiaries operated. Labor law violations documented and then covered up. A paper trail that led directly to Victoria's father, Edward Sterling, a proof of something much darker than arrogance. It was fraud. It was corruption. It was the kind of crime that destroyed communities and killed people. And it was documented in a shoebox in his closet for 9 years. Marcus sat on his bed, holding the box, thinking about what the next step meant. If he came forward, he would lose everything. His job was already gone. Sterling had made that clear. But his reputation would be destroyed. Victoria would turn on him. She would protect her father. She would protect the money. Then he heard Angela's voice. "Not for us. For everyone." He picked up his phone and called a number he'd saved years ago. Carmen Rodriguez, an investigative journalist he'd met once through a friend. He'd saved her number and never called it, not until now. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said when she answered. I have something for you, something that needs to be heard. After the gala, Victoria returned to her penthouse office alone. The city spread out below her like a kingdom that she thought was hers. But now it looked different. Now it looked like something that could collapse if you weren't careful. She couldn't work, she couldn't focus. Marcus's words kept repeating in her mind, like a song she couldn't get out of her head. What are you investing in? Not your money, your life. Her phone buzzed. Edward, her father. She took the call. I trust you established dominance with the new contractors, he said. There was satisfaction in his voice. Edward had raised her to believe that dominance was the same thing as leadership. I met the representatives, Victoria said carefully, and one of them made a point about investments. Edward's voice hardened. Did you shut him down? Not exactly. Silence on the line. Then Victoria, you're getting soft. Compassion is a weakness. People like that, they're resources. Use them, replace them. Never let them think you see them as equals. She ended the call without responding. After he hung up, Victoria pulled up Marcus' file on her computer. His criminal record from 15 years ago, youthful stupidity, possession charges, the kind of mistake that followed someone forever. But then 12 years of work, exemplary performance, one daughter, Lily, 7 years old, mother deceased, Angela Hayes, cancer. She clicked on Angela's obituary. Angela Hayes' beloved wife and mother died of cancer after 91 days of diagnosis. She is survived by her husband Marcus and daughter Lily. In lieu of flowers, the family requests donations to cancer research. Victoria felt something shift in her chest. This man had lost his wife. This man was raising a 7-year-old daughter alone. This man had come to a ballroom full of billionaires and spoken truth because she had demanded it, and she had humiliated him. Nathan came in with a folder. Ms. Sterling, the contractor Marcus Hayes, is trending on social media. For what? Videos from the gala. Your exchange with him. The sentiment is positive toward him. People are calling your treatment excessive. Victoria opened her phone and watched herself mocking him. The room laughing, him standing silent, the speech. The moment where she realized she was being seen, really seen, by someone she tried to reduce to nothing. Should we release a statement? Nathan asked. Victoria closed the phone. No, if he speaks ill, listen. After Nathan left, Victoria researched Sterling Holdings' practices. She started pulling files from her own office. Files she should have known existed. Files that showed her father's involvement in covering up violations, environmental contamination, labor law breaches, safety code violations in subsidiaries. The deeper she dug, the clearer it became. Sterling Holdings wasn't just a successful company, it was a successful company built on deception, and she had benefited from it. She had stayed powerful because of it. What am I? She said aloud, alone in her office. The only answer was her own reflection in the black window, staring back at her like a stranger. Marcus met with Carmen Rodriguez in a coffee shop 2 days later. He brought the shoebox. Carmen opened it slowly, reading through the documents with the kind of attention that told Marcus this was real. This mattered. This is federal, she said finally. This is criminal. I've had it for 9 years, Marcus said. I didn't come forward because I had a daughter. I was scared. Why now? Because someone asked me what I was investing in, and I realized I was investing in invisibility, and that's not what I want for my daughter. Carmen called sources, verified documents, built a timeline. She found other contractors, other companies, other people who'd seen the same violations and been paid off or threatened into silence. Meanwhile, Edward Sterling became aware that Marcus had come forward. He called Victoria. You, he said. It was an accusation and a threat all at once. What? Victoria asked, though she knew what. The mechanic, he went to the press with documents, with evidence. Edward, You let this happen. You soft-hearted, weak, pathetic, you let this happen. He hung up. Victoria sat in silence, understanding that her father had already begun the calculation. He would bury it, or he would bury her, or both. Then she made a decision. She went to her office and gathered every file that showed Edward's involvement. She gathered every memo, every email, every conversation that proved he had known about the violations, and covered them up. She called Carmen Rodriguez. "I'm giving you everything," she said. Carmen came to her office that evening. Victoria handed her a stack of documents. That would take down Sterling Holdings' entire infrastructure of corruption. "Why?" Carmen asked. "Because someone asked me what I was investing in," Victoria said, "and I realized I had a choice." 2 days later, Carmen's story broke. Sterling Holdings executive faces federal investigation for environmental violations and labor law breaches. The article named Edward Sterling. It named Victoria as having cooperated. It mentioned Marcus Hayes, the contractor who had brought initial evidence forward. Social media erupted. There were people calling for Edward's arrest. There were people criticizing Victoria for being complicit. There were people praising her for coming forward. Edward was arrested 3 days later. Federal agents appeared at his home with warrants and charges. Environmental fraud, labor law violations, money laundering. The press conference was scheduled for the following week. It was held in front of Sterling Holdings headquarters. There were reporters, cameras, satellite trucks from news stations all over the city. Victoria stepped to the podium first. She was smaller up there than Marcus would have expected, smaller than she'd seemed at the gala. She announced her resignation. She announced her cooperation with federal investigators. She announced the establishment of a remediation fund for communities affected by Sterling Holdings practices. She announced that she accepted responsibility for her own complicity, even if unintentional. "I was raised to believe that power and dominance were the same thing as leadership," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. "I was taught to see people as resources instead of humans. That teaching came from my father, and he is now facing charges for the consequences of that philosophy." She paused. "But I chose to listen when I was confronted with a different way of thinking, and I choose now to invest in making this right." Then she asked Marcus to stand beside her. He hadn't expected this. He hesitated, but he walked to the podium. The room went quiet. Marcus looked at the cameras. He thought about Lily, who was at school right now, probably in math class, learning things that would matter more than any of this. He thought about Angela, about her faith that truth mattered. "I came to that gala as a joke," he said. "I was supposed to be humiliated. That was the purpose, but instead I was asked a question and I answered it and something changed." He paused. "I want to speak to the people who look like me. The single parents working 2 jobs, the men sitting in cells for things they didn't do, the people told that their truth doesn't matter because they don't have money or power or status." His voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. "Your truth matters. What you know matters. Who you are not what you've done, not your past, but who you are right now that matters." He looked directly at the camera. "I carried mine in a shoebox for 9 years, in a garage, in a closet, while the woman I loved died, while my daughter learned to read, while I was tired and scared and trying to figure out how to be enough." His voice broke slightly, but he pushed through it. "One night, someone asked me a question in a ballroom, and I finally got to set it down. And I'm here to tell you that you don't have to carry yours forever either. But you have to be willing to put it down. You have to be willing to let it be heard." He turned to the camera again. "Lily, baby, I know you're watching this. Daddy loves you. Daddy is coming home, and we're going to be okay." He stepped back. Victoria stood next to him, and something in her face had changed. She was looking at him like he had looked at Harrington, with respect, with recognition. The photographs from that moment would be everywhere. The black contractor and the white CEO, standing together, having both been changed by choosing truth over power. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his new apartment. It was small, but it was theirs. There was a window that looked out at a street with trees on it. There was a backyard, a real yard, with space for Lily to run, space for him to build something. The settlement from Sterling Holdings had been enough to breathe, not enough to be rich, but enough to stop being trapped. He'd paid off the overdue bills, had bought Lily new shoes that fit. He'd commissioned a proper headstone for Angela's grave, and he'd started a consulting firm. It was small, just him in an office that used to be a clothing store. But he worked with companies on ethics and integrity. He helped them understand that doing right and being profitable weren't mutually exclusive. His first major speaking engagement was at Wharton Business School. The auditorium held 1,200 students, future CEOs, future leaders, future people who would make decisions that would affect communities like his. Marcus stood on stage, wearing a suit that fit now. And he told them the truth. He told them about the shoebox, about the garage, about Lily and Angela, about the night he spoke at a gala, and changed the trajectory of his life by refusing to stay small. You're all going to have moments, he said, where you have to choose between power and integrity. Those moments will feel small, and then they'll feel enormous. And you'll have to decide what you're investing in, because you're always investing in something. The question is whether it's worth the investment you're making. The students gave him a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He'd never been applauded before. He'd spent his whole life being invisible, and now unexpectedly he was being seen. After the speech, a young man approached him. He was maybe 23, black, wearing a thrift store jacket, his eyes red from crying. "Mr. Hayes," he said. "Yes, son. I work 2 jobs. I have a daughter. She's 4. Her mother left us last year. I'm failing this program. I was going to drop out tonight. I was going to give up, but I heard what you said and..." Marcus put his hand on the young man's shoulder. "What's your name?" "Marcus. My name's Marcus too." "Well, Marcus, you're not dropping out. You're going to call my office on Monday. You're going to speak to a woman named Priya. She's going to put you in an internship that will pay enough to stop working your other jobs. You're going to finish this program, and in 2 years you're going to be working for my firm." Young Marcus couldn't answer. He was crying. "Sir, nobody has ever done anything like this for me." "Somebody did it for me once," Marcus said. 12 years ago in the garage. A man named Robert looked at my record and saw my hands instead of my past. Now it's my turn to pay it forward. After the speech, Lily was waiting in the lobby. She was 8 now, missing a front tooth, wearing a yellow dress, smelling like strawberry shampoo. She jumped into her father's arms without hesitation. "Can we go home now?" she asked. "Where's home, baby?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "The one with the yard," she said. "Yes, baby, we can go home now." He carried her out of Wharton with her arms around his neck. Victoria was waiting by the car. She had been released from prison 2 months earlier. After serving 3 years of a 7-year sentence, the judge had reduced her sentence due to her cooperation and her demonstrated commitment to making amends. She opened the back door for Lily and buckled her in carefully. Lily gave her a kiss on the cheek without being asked. Victoria closed her eyes for a full second. Marcus got into the driver's seat. He looked in the rearview mirror at his daughter, already starting to fall asleep with her head against the window. He looked at the sky. "Angela," he said quietly, "I kept my promise. All of them." He started the engine and drove toward home. 1 year later, Marcus stood in front of the mirror in his apartment. He was wearing a suit again, but this time it fit. This time he'd bought it deliberately. Had taken Lily with him to pick it out. Lily appeared in the bathroom doorway, the way she always did. "You look fancy, Daddy. Where are you going?" This time his answer was different than it had been a year and a half ago. "I'm going to help people understand something important," he said, "about being brave, about telling the truth even when it's scary." He thought about the journey as he dressed, from invisible mechanic with a broken watch to a man whose words mattered, not because he'd gained power, but because he'd chosen to stay human. When systems wanted him to disappear, Lily asked, "Will you bring home the truth again, Daddy?" Marcus looked at his daughter, and he understood something that he'd been learning for a long time now. The truth wasn't something you brought home. The truth was something you carried every day, and you brought it home with you in your bones, in your choices, in who you chose to become. "I'm always carrying it," he said, "but this time I'm carrying it so you can carry it with me." Lily smiled at him, and in that moment Marcus saw Angela's smile. He saw the future stretching out before him. Not perfect, not easy, but real. A future where he didn't have to choose between being visible and being safe. He could be both. The story didn't end with Marcus, it echoed. After Marcus' testimony became public, similar investigations began in other cities. Philadelphia found violations at Sterling Holdings subsidiaries. Atlanta discovered environmental contamination from Sterling-owned parking garages. Boston uncovered labor violations at Sterling-operated dialysis centers. The pattern was too clear to ignore. A coalition formed. Families affected by Sterling's practices came together. They demanded federal oversight. They demanded accountability. They demanded change. A bill was proposed in Congress, the Environmental Justice and Labor Protection Act. It was named after Angela Hayes, Marcus' wife, who had believed in truth, even when truth was expensive. Marcus became a consultant to the government agencies implementing the new oversight. He spoke at universities. He worked with companies trying to understand what integrity really meant. Victoria was released from prison after serving 3 years. She became an advocate for corporate accountability. She and Marcus never became friends, but they became something else. Two people who had learned that truth mattered more than power. Lily grew up watching her father change systems. She watched him help young men like young Marcus. She watched him keep his promises. And when she was old enough to understand, she decided what she wanted to do with her life. She became a lawyer. She specialized in environmental justice. She used her father's story, his shoebox, his words, his courage, as the framework for helping others find their own voice. The point of the story in the end wasn't that Marcus won or Victoria lost. The point was that when someone chooses truth, it ripples. When someone refuses to be invisible, it changes the field. When someone loves their child enough to be brave, it echoes across generations. That's what the story was really about. That's what it will always be about. If this story inspired you, if it reminded you of something important about the kind of person you want to be, subscribe to our channel for more stories about grace, integrity, and the quiet courage it takes to speak truth. When the whole world is telling you to stay silent,